She'd appear on my doorstep every other day with a clipboard and a fake smile, asking invasive questions. When will your parents be visiting? Does the real owner know you're living here? I tried to clarify that I was the legal homeowner, but she'd just shake her head. Honey, she'd say, girls your age don't just stumble into houses like this. By week 2, things escalated. I'd come home to find her in my driveway, snapping pictures of my mailbox, garbage cans and car, claiming she was documenting suspicious activity. She sent out neighborhood-wide safety alerts about unknown individuals in the community. Me. She never used my name, but it was clear who she meant. Week 3 brought phony violations. A bright orange notice was taped to my door, claiming my lawn grass was 3.2 inches tall, above the HOA's 3-inch limit. I measured it myself, exactly 2.5 inches. Still, she demanded a $200 fine. 2 days later, another violation. Supposedly, I was parking commercial vehicles overnight. For the record, it's a Honda Civic. Then the neighbors began to avoid me. People who used to smile as I passed with my dog now turned away. Whispers spread that I was a con artist or drug dealer. How else could someone so young afford such a home? Karen would say. Mrs. Patterson, the sweet older woman 2 houses down, started crossing the street just to avoid walking past my house. By week 4, Karen fancied herself a full-on detective. She left angry voicemails demanding proof of income and threatening to expose me. She told me she'd hired a private investigator. And then she crossed the line. She called the police, claimed I was trespassing, accused me of squatting in my own home. Officer Martinez showed up at my door one evening, clearly uncomfortable. Mom, we got a trespassing report. I know this is likely a misunderstanding, but I have to follow up. Behind him stood Karen, arms crossed, smirking as if she'd cracked the case of the century. This young woman has been illegally occupying this home, she told the officer. I demand you arrest her for breaking and entering. I calmly invited Officer Martinez in, showed him my deed, driver's license, and insurance paperwork. He reviewed it all carefully. Meanwhile, Karen shouted through the window that my documents were forged. Finally, Officer Martinez handed me back my paperwork and shook his head. She never asked how many hours I worked. She never asked how hard I worked. She just looked at my face, my age, my skin, and decided I didn't belong. Karen Whitmore didn't come to my house to introduce herself or welcome me to the neighborhood. She showed up with a warning. No questions, no attempt at understanding, just assumptions. She never bothered to check my paperwork until it was too late. By then, we were already face-to-face in court. It's funny how some people think that being young means you're just renting. Have you ever heard someone say success has an age requirement? Share your story in the comments. My name is Sarah Hamilton. I'm 23 years old, a recent law school graduate working as a paralegal in real estate law. Most people assume I'm just another broke young adult trying to fake it until I make it. But the truth is, I'm the granddaughter of Mayor William Hamilton, the man who founded Oakwood Estates in 1983. The house at 1247 Maple Lane wasn't a trendy purchase. It was a legacy, passed to me through my grandfather's will. 3 months ago, after finishing law school and tackling the probate process, I moved in. That's when the trouble began. That short amount of time, just 3 months, was long enough to get me on the radar of Karen Whitmore, the head of our Homeowners Association for the past 3 years. She's known for obsessive rule enforcement, intimidation tactics, and using her husband's influence. He's a senior bank manager to get her way. From the day I arrived, Karen decided I didn't belong in her neighborhood. She didn't see a young professional beginning her life. She saw a mystery to unravel, and she made it her mission to dig into my life, convinced that someone like me couldn't own a home like this without hiding something. It started small. These things always do. Your documentation is perfectly legitimate, ma'am. I'm going to have a word with the complainant about filing false reports. As he walked toward her, I heard him say, Mrs. Whitmore, this is the 3rd false report you've filed this month. If you continue, you may face charges of your own. Watching her storm off, ranting about corrupt police and conspiracies, I made a decision. She wanted to know who I really was. Fine. 2 can play that game. But unlike Karen, I actually know what I'm doing. I called my father that night. Judge Hamilton listened quietly, then said, "Your grandfather always said bullies only understand one language. Maybe it's time this woman learned some vocabulary." So I began my own investigation. I had legal training. I had access to HOA records dating back to the founding of Oakwood Estates. And what I found was staggering. Karen had been abusing her position for years, enforcing rules selectively, changing regulations without proper votes, and using HOA funds for personal legal expenses. She'd targeted anyone who didn't fit her idea of right. Meanwhile, she herself was in violation multiple times. Fences too tall, an illegal number of pets, commercial vehicles parked overnight. But my biggest breakthrough came through a woman named Mrs. Thompson. She'd lived in the neighborhood since my grandfather's time. When I introduced myself, her face lit up and she said, "You're Bill's granddaughter." Oh, he was the finest man in this community. She had stories, lots of them, about how Karen tried to have her evicted over excess cats. She only had one. About harassment, intimidation, and neighbors Karen had driven out. But Mrs. Thompson also gave me something else: allies. She introduced me to Mr. Rodriguez, who saw Karen tearing up my flower beds. She connected me with Linda Park, a single mom fined for having inappropriate lawn decor. A sandbox. One by one, they came forward. Together, we documented Karen's behavior in detail. And then, the final move. I contacted the county HOA oversight board. Turns out, Oakwood Estates had been operating under outdated bylaws, giving Karen far more power than she legally should have. The board was very interested to hear about the false rule changes, misuse of funds, and systemic harassment. Karen never saw it coming. She wanted to play detective. I let her. But in the end, this story won't be about a young woman who didn't belong. It'll be about a woman who stood her ground, knew her rights, and took on a bully, and won. The fall of a neighborhood bully. How I stood up, spoke out, and reclaimed my grandfather's legacy. The harassment of residents had finally reached a tipping point. After formal complaints and mounting evidence, the HOA Oversight Board scheduled a review at the next monthly meeting, one that would require Karen Whitmore to publicly justify every decision she'd made as president of Oakwood Estates. Typically, HOA meetings drew about 15 out of 50 households. That night, 42 people showed up, nearly the entire community. Karen walked into the community center expecting her usual audience, a few board members and maybe a couple of concerned parents. Instead, she was met with a room full of residents, many of whom hadn't attended a meeting in years. She looked momentarily confused, but then smiled, no doubt assuming people were finally taking her leadership seriously. "Good evening, everyone," she said, settling into her usual seat at the head of the table. "It's wonderful to see such enthusiastic community involvement. As you know, we have some serious security concerns to discuss tonight." She lifted a thick folder and smiled directly at me. She began her presentation, a 20-minute monologue, complete with photos of my car, copies of my deed, which she claimed were forged, and a timeline of my suspicious activities, including daring acts like receiving mail, parking in my driveway, and mowing the lawn. By the end of her performance, she recommended that the HOA contact law enforcement and begin formal proceedings to remove me from the neighborhood. The room fell silent. Then Mrs. Thompson stood slowly, using her cane for balance. "Karen, dear," she said gently, "I think it's time you and everyone else learned the truth about the young woman you've been harassing." She turned to me. "Sarah, would you please come forward?" I stood, walked steadily to the front, and opened my grandfather's leather briefcase. From it, I pulled a framed photo, a 1983 snapshot of the groundbreaking ceremony for Oakwood Estates, featuring my grandfather, William Hamilton, cutting the ribbon alongside city officials. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, projecting clearly to the suddenly attentive room, "this is my grandfather, William Hamilton. He purchased the land, designed this neighborhood, and founded the Oakwood Estates HOA, with the goal of protecting residents' rights, not violating them." I held up the master property deed, signed and notarized by my grandfather himself. This document shows he not only owned my house, but every lot in this community. He sold parcels to families, helped them build their dream homes, and kept meticulous records. I pulled out a thick packet. These include those original records, his will, the probate ruling, and my fully legal title to 1247 Maple Lane. Then I turned to Karen. You asked for an investigation, Mrs. Whitmore. I conducted one. I connected my laptop to the projector, and the screen lit up. These are audio recordings, your threats, your fabricated accusations. These are pictures of the property damage you caused, ripping up my flower beds while I was at work. And here, I flashed an image of a financial report, are records of your unauthorized use of $3,200 in HOA funds to pay a personal lawyer. Funds meant for the community. The murmuring grew louder. Karen tried to speak, but I continued. Here are documented violations from your own property. An illegal 6-foot fence, 4 dogs when the HOA allows 2, and your husband's commercial vehicle parked regularly overnight. Mrs. Thompson stood again. Sarah isn't the only one Karen has targeted. Over the past 3 years, she's harassed 17 households, sending fake fines, manufactured violations, and threats. Some of our neighbors moved away just to escape her. One by one, others began to speak. Mr. Rodriguez raised a hand. I have video of Karen tearing up Sarah's flowers, then fining her the next day. Linda Park, trembling but determined, stood. Karen tried to have my children's sandbox removed, saying it was a danger. The truth? She didn't like the sound of kids laughing outside her window. Karen, now visibly panicking, stood and raised her voice. This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I have the authority to investigate suspicious activity. You've all been fooled. That girl is committing fraud. Someone her age doesn't just inherit an $800,000 house. I raised one last document. You're right, Mrs. Whitmore, it's uncommon. Which is why you may be interested to know that my father is Judge Robert Hamilton of the County Superior Court, deeply concerned about the ongoing harassment of his daughter. Karen's face turned from white to pale green. He's particularly interested, I added, in your misuse of community funds, which constitutes embezzlement under state law. The room went silent. Not with confusion, this time it was anticipation. The County HOA Oversight Board has also reviewed your years of unauthorized rule changes, selective enforcement, and financial mismanagement. Their findings are being forwarded to the district attorney. Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat. I move for a vote of no confidence in Karen Whitmore as HOA president. Seconded. Several voices called out. The vote passed with 41 hands raised. Karen turned in circles searching for support, but the room had turned against her. This isn't legal, she snapped. You can't just vote me out. I know my rights. But Mr. Rodriguez was already circulating a petition for a formal special election. Karen stormed out, shouting about lawyers and revenge. Nobody followed. As people filed out of the community center, they hugged me. They shook my hand. Many apologized. Your grandfather would be proud, Mrs. Thompson whispered as she squeezed me close. He always said this neighborhood should be led by those who believe in justice. Within a week, Karen and her husband had hastily put their house on the market. The violations stopped. The scare tactics gone. They priced the house 15% below market value, desperate to leave a community that no longer feared them. Despite my protests, I was unanimously elected as the new HOA president. Sarah, Mrs. Thompson said during the swearing-in ceremony, your grandfather built this place with fairness in mind, and you've honored that. My first act, I formed a grievance committee to review all past and future complaints. Fairly. We launched monthly budget reports and required full community approval for any legal expenditures. The $3,200 Karen used to harass me, recovered during the sale of her home. We used it to install the long-requested neighborhood playground, a symbol of a fresh start. The atmosphere changed overnight. Neighbors smiled again. Kids played outside without fear. People decorated their houses for the holidays, hosted block parties, and made new memories. Even Mrs. Patterson, the one who used to cross the street, became one of my weekly visitors, gifting lemon cookies every Sunday. 6 months later, we held the first annual William Hamilton Community Day, featuring a ribbon cutting for the playground and a tribute to the man who had envisioned this neighborhood. My father, Judge Hamilton, attended as guest of honor. His quiet presence sent a strong message. This community stood for justice, and it always would. And something unexpected happened too. Daniel Rodriguez, Mr. Rodriguez's son and a landscape architect, helped design our new community garden on the cul-de-sac. We fell for each other during the build. Our first date was a picnic right there among the roses, and he proposed 6 months later, in the same garden my grandfather had planted 40 years ago. 2 years later, I stood on my front lawn watering those roses, wedding ring glittering as I adjusted the hose. Daniel and I had bought the house next door and were now expecting our first child. Karen had tried to destroy my life because she couldn't imagine someone like me had earned what I had. But in trying to tear me down, she lost everything. Oakwood Estates went on to thrive. We implemented new programs for incoming residents, welcome committees, mentorship, and inclusion initiatives. Word spread that Oakwood Estates was truly a community. Property values actually went up. I opened a law firm specializing in HOA disputes and property rights. People started calling from across the country, victims of their own neighborhood Karens. And case by case, I fought back, helping others reclaim their homes, their dignity, and their peace. Mrs. Thompson, now 87 and witty as ever, became like a grandmother to me. She loved telling the story. Little Sarah Hamilton, she'd say with pride, stood up to a woman who thought power meant control. But Sarah reminded this neighborhood what real leadership looks like. She was right. The final vindication came when the district attorney formally charged Karen with harassment and embezzlement. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to restitution and community service. Her face made the local news, a cautionary tale of what happens when small-time tyrants are no longer feared. Karen had tried to paint me as an outsider, someone who didn't belong. Instead, I became the person who ensured everyone belonged. And that's a legacy my grandfather would surely be proud of. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well, building something better, and teaching the bullies of the world that people who know their worth will never back down.